Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, continue reading from the Bhagavatam. This is Canto 5, Chapter 9. Yeah, Chapter 9, and we're beginning Chapter 9. So there's usually a little summary in the beginning. And so far we've been following the life and the progress of Maharaj Bharata. First, he acted as in the ruling class, the emperor of the world, and he performed his duties very nicely, performed devotional service, renounced his kingdom, turned it over to his sons when he became older, and then retired to a holy place, Pulaha Ashram. But he became distracted with attraction and affection for a pet deer. He became attached to a pet deer, and it was a distraction from his devotional service. And unfortunately, he had to take birth as a deer. But he had full consciousness of his mistake, what he'd done. So he stayed in Pula Ashram, not as a renounced human being, but as a deer. And he was very careful not to identify with that situation, because he understood what had happened, and he was simply waiting to be released from that lifetime, from that karmic reaction, deer. And so we're going to read about his next life. He was a very, very great devotee. And sometimes that happens to a devotee who's very, very elevated. They may have to take a birth like that, but it's the last, one of the last ones, because they're well on their way. And it only serves as impetus to desire even more Krishna consciousness. So that's what happened to Maharaj Bharata. His desire for Krishna increased very, very greatly. So now this is his next birth. In this chapter, Bharat Maharaj's attainment of the body of a Brahmin is described. In this body, he remained like one dull, deaf, and dumb, so much so that when he was brought before the goddess Kali to be killed as a sacrifice, he never protested but remained silent. After having given up the body of the deer, he took birth in the womb of the youngest wife of a Brahmin. In this life, he could also remember the activities of his past life, and in order to avoid the influence of society, he remained like a deaf and dumb person. He was very careful not to fall down again. He did not mix with anyone who was not a devotee. This process should be adopted by every devotee, as advised by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Asat Sangatyag E Vaishnavachar. One should strictly avoid the company of non-devotees, even though they may be family members. When Bharat Maharaj was in the body of a Brahmin, the people in the neighborhood thought of him as crazy, dull fellow. But within he was always chanting and remembering Vyāsadeva, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Although his father wanted to give him an education and purify him as a Brahmin by offering him the sacred thread, he remained in such a way that his father and mother could understand he was crazy and not interested in the reformatory method. Nonetheless, he remained fully Krishna conscious, even without undergoing such official ceremonies. Due to his silence, some people who were no better than animals began to tease him in many ways, but he tolerated this. After the death of his father and mother, his stepmother and stepbrothers began to treat him very poorly. They would give him the most condemned food, but still he did not mind. He remained completely absorbed in Krishna consciousness. He was ordered by his stepbrothers and mother to guard a paddy field one night, and at that time the leader of a dacoit party took him away and tried to kill him by offering him as a sacrifice before Bhadrakali. When the dacoits brought Bharat Maharaj before the goddess Kali and raised a chopper to kill him, the goddess Kali became immediately alarmed due to the mistreatment of a devotee. She came out of the deity and, taking the chopper in her own hands, killed all the dacoits there. Thus, a pure devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead can remain silent despite the mistreatment of non-devotees. Rogues and dacoits who misbehave toward a devotee are punished at last by the arrangement of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Text 1. Sukadeva Goswami continued, "My dear king, after giving up the body of a deer, Bharat Maharaj took birth in a very pure Brahmin family. There was a Brahmin who belonged to the dynasty of Angira. He was fully qualified with Brahminical qualifications. He could control his mind and senses, and he had studied the Vedic literatures and other subsidiary literatures. He was expert in giving charity, and was always satisfied, tolerant, very gentle, learned, and non-envious. He was self-realized and engaged in the devotional service of the Lord. He remained always in a trance. He had 9 equally qualified sons by his first wife. By his second wife he begot twins, a brother and a sister, of which the male child was said to be the topmost devotee and foremost of saintly kings, Bharat Maharaj. This, then, is the story of the birth he took after giving up the body of a deer." Prabhupada's commentary. Bharat Maharaj was a great devotee. He did not attain success in one life. The Bhagavad Gita, it is said that a devotee who does not fulfill his devotional duties in one life is given a chance to be born in a fully qualified Brahmin family, or a rich Kshatriya family, or Vaishya family. Suchinam Srimatam Gehe. Bharat Maharaj was the firstborn son of Maharaj Rishabha in a rich Kshatriya family. But due to his willful negligence of his spiritual duties and his excessive attachment to an insignificant deer, he was obliged to take birth as the son of a deer. However, due to his strong position as a devotee, he was gifted with the remembrance of his past life. Being repentant, he remained in a solitary forest and always thought of Krishna. Then he was given the chance to take birth in a very good Brahmin family. Text 3. Due to his being especially gifted with the Lord's mercy, Bharat Maharaj could remember the incidents of his past life. Although he received the body of a Brahmin, he was still very much afraid of his relatives and friends who were not devotees. He was always very cautious of such association because he feared he would again fall down. Consequently, he manifested himself before the public eye as a madman. dull, blind, and deaf, so that others would not try to talk to him. In this way, he saved himself from bad association. Within, he was always thinking of the lotus feet of the Lord and chanting the Lord's glories, which save one from the bondage of fruit of action. In this way, he saved himself from the onslaught of non-devotee associates. It's interesting because that appears to be the precedent that was set by Vyāsadeva himself toward the end of his appearance. Of course, he's an incarnation of the Lord, but toward the end of his manifest pastimes, he behaved like a dull, deaf, crazy, mad person. And he also was harassed by those absorbed in the lowest modes. And now we see, of course, Maharaj Bharat was his son, but he became distracted in his devotional practice toward the end of his life, then had to take birth as a deer, and now he's acting as a deaf, dumb, blind person, but within he's a deaf, dumb, crazy person. Within he is totally absorbed in devotional service. We see that sometimes with devotees, like Gorkashordas Babaji also behaved very unusually, specifically so that he wouldn't be approached or harassed by people that were too materialistic. Not harassed, but looking for his association, to try to associate with him. And he didn't want to associate with those people. So he also showed some very kind of behavior that would discourage anyone from trying to get to know him. It says, in this way, he saved himself from the onslaught of non-devotee associates. See how serious it is to associate with those who are not valuing Krishna consciousness. They're simply materially attached. To associate with them means to engage in similar activities with them, to eat together, to go places together. You're associating, and then discussing the topics that they discuss. So then the mind is engaged. Together, the minds are engaged on the same topics of discussion. And in that way, the devotee becomes contaminated, because the non-devotee, their senses are not engaged in devotional service to the Lord, engaged in sense gratification. And the minds are not fixed on the form and pastimes and service, hearing and chanting about the Lord. So they're hearing and chanting about material things. To associate with them, then one is associating in material consciousness. So for a devotee, it's a big problem to associate with people like that. That to take their association, it doesn't mean that you don't see people like that, or devote materialistically engaged people. Actually, the devotee wants to see how to engage them in Krishna consciousness. Try to give their association. But if that can't be done, then they should be avoided. Prabhupada's commentary: every living entity is bound by different activities due to association with the modes of nature. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, Karanam Gunasangasya Sadasadyani Janmasu. This is due to his association with that material nature. Thus he meets with good and evil among various species. We get different types of bodies among 8,400,000 species, according to our karma. Karmana davanitrina. We work under the influence of material nature, contaminated by the three modes, and thus we get a certain type of body according to superior order. This is called karma bandha. To get out of this karma bandha, one must engage himself in devotional service. Then one will not be affected by the modes of material nature. Mam chayo vyavacharina bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatityaitan brahmabhuraya kalpate. One who engages in full devotional service, who does not fall down in any circumstance, at once transcends the modes of material nature and thus comes to the level of Brahman. To remain immune from the material qualities, one must engage himself in devotional service. Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu. That is the perfection of life. When Maharaj Bharat took birth as a Brahmin, he was not very interested in the duties of a Brahmin, but within he remained a pure Vaishnava, always thinking of the lotus feet of the Lord. As advised in Bhagavad Gita, Manmana bhava madbhakto madhyajimam namaskuru. This is the only process by which one can be saved from the danger of repeated birth and death. So the process is always thinking of the lotus feet of the Lord. Text 4. The Brahmin's father's mind was always filled with affection for his son, Jad Bharat Maharaj. Therefore, he was always attached to Jad Bharat. Because Jad Bharat was unfit to enter the Grihastha ashram, he simply executed the purificatory process up to the end of the Brahmachari ashram. Although Jad Bharat was unwilling to accept his father's instructions, the Brahmin nonetheless instructed him in how to keep clean, how to wash, thinking that the son should be taught by the father. Prabhupada's commentary. Jad Bharat was Bharat Maharaj in the body of a Brahmin. He outwardly conducted himself as if he were dull, deaf, dumb, and blind. Actually, he was quite alert within. He knew perfectly well of the results of fruitive activity and the results of devotional service. In the body of a Brahmin, Maharaj Bharat was completely absorbed in devotional service within. Therefore, it was not at all necessary for him to execute regulative principles of fruitive activity. As confirmed in Srimad Bhagavatam, one has to satisfy Hari, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is the perfection of the regulative principles of fruitive activity. Besides that, it is stated in Srimad Bhagavatam. Dharma svanustita pumsan vishvakshena katashriya notpadayat yadi ratim shramahi evakevalam. Duties executed by men, regardless of occupation, are only so much useless labor if they do not provoke attraction for the message of the Supreme Lord. These karmakanda activities are required as long as one has not developed Krishna consciousness. If one is developed in Krishna consciousness, there's no need to execute the prior regulative principles of Karmakanda. Srila Madhavendra Puri said, "O regulative principles of Karmakanda, please excuse me. I cannot follow all these regulative principles, for I'm fully engaged in devotional service." He expressed the desire to sit somewhere beneath a tree, continue chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Consequently, he did not execute all the regulative principles. Similarly, Haridas Thakur was born in a Mohammedan family. From the very beginning of his life, he was never trained in the Karmakanda system, but because he was always chanting the holy name of the Lord, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu accepted him as an Amacharya, the authority in chanting the holy name. As Jad Bharat Maharaj was always engaged in devotional service within his mind, since he had executed the regulative principles continuously for 3 lives, he was not interested in continuing to execute them, although his Brahmin father wanted him to do so. So Haridas Thakur, he was born in a Mohammedan family. So he was not trained at all in these purificatory processes and regulative service. He simply took shelter of the holy name of the Lord. And Lord Chaitanya accepted him as the Namacharya. But it's not the Brahman activity is part of the Varnashram Dharma, which is very essential for the smooth running of society. So it's not that it is to be given up, or that there's something wrong with it, or it's bad. It's not the enemy. The Varnashram system serves a very important function. It's created by Krishna himself, he says in Bhagavad Gita. These systems were created by him. They have a very important purpose in serving the Lord. But there's something higher, and that's what these different systems aim at supporting, is the opportunity to go into pure devotional service. So when that opportunity comes, then these things are no longer useful. I don't know if it's safe to say, but maybe like training wheels on a bicycle. And when the person knows how to stay upright on the bicycle, then there's no need for the training wheels. But they're very important. Otherwise, how would the person get to that point? So they offer support. But here, Jad Bharat was already on the pure devotional service platform. So there was really no need for him to engage in the Varnashram system. He'd already transcended the whole material world. He was fully absorbed in the lotus feet of the Lord, devotional service. Text 5. Jad Bharat behaved before his father like a fool. Despite his father's adequately instructing him in Vedic knowledge, he behaved in that way so his father would know that he was unfit for instruction and would abandon the attempt to instruct him further. He would behave in a completely opposite way. Although instructed to wash his hands after evacuating, he would wash them before. Nonetheless, his father wanted to give him Vedic instructions during the spring and summer. He tried to teach him Gayatri Mantra, along with Omkar and Vyāriti, but after 4 months, his father was still not successful in instructing him. That was his way of communicating to his father that this was not appropriate to instruct him in these things. It was not appropriate. And he also didn't want to be bothered with this. He was already fully absorbed in meditation on the Lord. It was like a distraction for him. Text 6. The Brahmin father of Jadbharat considered his son his heart and soul, and therefore he was very much attached to him. Yes. Son's a pure devotee of Krishna, of course he's going to be attached. His father was trying to serve him. He had his best interest at heart. He wanted to see him trained and educated. He was trying to serve him. Of course he says he considered his son his heart and soul. Oh, he must have been felt so much attraction and love for this particular son because of his son's connection with the Lord. He thought it wise to educate his son properly, and being absorbed in this unsuccessful endeavor, he tried to teach his son the rules and regulations of brahmachari, including the execution of Vedic vows, cleanliness, study of the Vedas, regulative methods, service to the spiritual master, and the method of offering a fire sacrifice. He tried his best to teach his son in this way, but all his endeavors failed. In his heart, he hoped that his son would be a learned scholar, but all his attempts were unsuccessful. Like everyone, this Brahmin was attached to his home. He had forgotten that someday he would die. Death, however, was not forgetful. At the proper time, death appeared and took him away. Prabhupada's commentary. Those too attached to family life, who forget that death comes in the future to take them away, become attached and unable to finish their duty as human beings. The duty of human life is to solve all the problems of life, but instead people remain attached to family affairs and duties. Although they forget death, death will not forget them. Suddenly they will be kicked off the platform of a peaceful family life. One may forget that he has to die, but death never forgets. Death comes always at the right time. The Brahmin father of Jadbharat wanted to teach his son the process of brahmachari, but he was unsuccessful due to his son's unwillingness to undergo the process of Vedic advancement. Jadbharat was simply concerned with returning home back to Godhead by executing devotional service through Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, hearing and chanting about Vishnu. He did not care for the Vedic instructions of his father. When one is fully interested in the service of the Lord, he does not need to follow all the regulative principles enunciated in the Vedas. Of course, for an ordinary man, the Vedic principles are imperative. No one can avoid them. But when one has attained the perfection of devotional service, it's not very important to follow Vedic principles. Lord Krishna advised Arjuna to ascend to the platform of Nishtraigunya, a transcendental position above Vedic principles. Traigunya Vasayavira, Nishtraigunya Bhavarjuna, Nirdvanvo Nityasattvasto, Niryoga Shema Atmavan. The Vedas mainly deal with the subject of the three modes of material nature. Rise above these modes, O Arjuna. Be transcendental to all of them. Be free from all dualities, and from all anxieties for gain and safety. Be established in the self. Yes, that's the Varnashram Dharma. It's according to the different modes, the Varnas, according to the different modes of material nature, structure of society. In the Vedas, it says mainly deal with the subject of the three modes of material nature. that Srila Vyāsadeva, for the benefit of the human society, he compiled the Vedic scriptures. And they all deal with the modes of material nature and elevation in the modes and smooth running of society. But even he himself, Vedavyas, was not satisfied until he transcended. And that's where the Bhagavatam comes. What we're reading is the Bhagavatam is completely transcendental to the three modes of material nature, because the summum bonum is discussed. Summum bonum, the highest truth, which is devotional service to the Lord, which is beyond the modes of material nature. So that's where Jad Bharat was. He was on that platform, beyond the modes of material nature, so there was no need for him to learn everything that for dealing with the modes of material nature, because he wasn't influenced by them anymore, being fully absorbed, fully engaged in devotional service. Text 7. Thereafter, the Brahman's younger wife, after entrusting her twin children, the boy and girl, to the elder wife, departed for Patiloka, voluntarily dying with the husband. This is not practiced in this time now. Up until fairly recently it was. That it's called sati right. When the husband passes away, if the wife is living, she enters the cremation fire along with her husband. Talk about not this body, but it's not practiced now. Text 8. After the father died, the 9 stepbrothers of Jad Bharat, who considered Jad Bharat dull and brainless, abandoned the father's attempt to give Jad Bharat a complete education. The stepbrothers of Jad Bharat were learned in the 3 Vedas, Rig, Veda, Samaveda, and Yajurveda, which very much encourage fruitive activity. The 9 brothers were not at all spiritually enlightened in devotional service to the Lord. Consequently, they could not understand the highly exalted position of Jad Bharat. So they were very much concerned with advancement in material life, so-called advancement, fruitive activity. So Jad Bharat, they couldn't understand his position. Text 9 and 10. Degraded men are actually no better than animals. The only difference is the animals have 4 legs, and such men have only 2. These 2-legged animalistic men used to call Jad Bharat mad, dull, deaf, and dumb. They mistreated him, and Jad Bharat behaved for them like a madman who was deaf, blind, or dull. He did not protest or try to convince them he was not so. If others wanted him to do something, he acted according to their desires. Whatever food he could acquire by begging or by wages, and whatever came of its own accord, be it a small quantity, palatable, stale, or tasteless, he would accept and eat. He never ate anything for sense gratification, because he was already liberated from bodily conception, which induces one to accept palatable or unpalatable food. He was full in transcendental consciousness of devotional service. Therefore, he was unaffected by the dualities arising from bodily conceptions. Actually, his body was as strong as a bull's, and his limbs were very muscular. He didn't care for winter or summer, wind or rain. He never covered his body at any time. He lay on the ground and never smeared oil on his body or took a bath. Because his body was dirty, His spiritual effulgence and knowledge were covered, just as the splendor of a valuable gem is covered by dirt. He only wore a dirty loincloth and his sacred thread, which was blackish. Understanding he was born in a Brahmin family, people would call him a Brahmabandhu and other names. Being thus insulted and neglected by materialistic people, he wandered here and there. We see that kind of not being able to see through some of these externals. You see that with Lord Shiva also, when Daksha was offensive to Lord Shiva. He's always covered with ashes, and he hangs out with ghosts and like this. Not understanding how the spirit soul is completely transcendental to the modes of material nature, and then people only see how someone's body is situated in the modes. They can't see the spirit. They can only see the material, the gross manifestation. They can't see what may be going on inside spiritually. So you can just imagine these brothers must have been quite puffed up with their position. And he was a family member with a dirty Brahmin thread yet. Lying on the ground, not bathing. And he was like the deranged family member. And here they were, very educated and probably quite opulent. And so they didn't have much affection for him, it appears. Prabhupada's commentary. Srila Narottam Das Thakur sung, one who has no desire to maintain the body, or who is not anxious to keep the body in order, who is satisfied in any condition, must be either mad or liberated. Actually, Bharat Maharaj, in his birth as Jad Bharat, was completely liberated from material dualities. He was a Paramahamsa, therefore he did not care for bodily comfort. Text 11. Jad Bharat used to work only for food. His stepbrothers took advantage of this and engaged him in agricultural fieldwork in exchange for some food. But actually he did not know how to work very well in the field. He did not know where to spread dirt or to make the ground level or uneven. His brothers used to give him broken rice, oil cakes, the chaff of rice, worm-eaten grains, burnt grains that had stuck to the pot, but he gladly accepted all this as if it was nectar. He did not hold any grudges, and all this very, very gladly. Wow. Here they had the opportunity to serve a pure devotee of the Lord, and this was the kind of service they were offering, because they were so materially contaminated. Wow. It appears that he was accepting whatever was coming. He must have been accepting their service. Oh. Hare Krishna. Prabhupada's commentary. The platform of Paramahamsa is described in Bhagavad Gita. Sama dukkha sukham dhiram saurmita vaya kalpate. When one is callous to all duality, the happiness and distress of the material world, one is fit for amritattva, eternal life. Bharat Maharaj was determined to finish his business in the material world. He did not care at all for the world of duality. He was complete in Krishna consciousness and was oblivious to good and evil, happiness and distress. As stated in Chaitanya Charitamrita, In the material world, conceptions of good and bad are all mental speculations. Therefore, saying this is good and this is bad is all a mistake. One has to understand that in the material world of duality, to think that this is good or that this is bad is simply a mental concoction. However, one should not imitate this consciousness. One should actually be situated on the spiritual platform of neutrality. So to accept everything favorable for devotional service and reject everything unfavorable, that's really the only good and bad. Everything else is bad. Is the illustration about the stool. That in the fields, they pass stool in the field sometimes. And when the sun is beating on it for some time, the top becomes dry. So material life is like that. Oh, this top part is not so bad. This top part is good, nice and dry. But after all, it's still stool, wet or dry. It's still... So material things are like that. Oh, this is good or this is bad. In terms of sense gratification, it's all bad. Whether it's good for sense gratification or it's bad for sense gratification, it's all bad because it's sense gratification. So the only duality there really is favorable for Krishna consciousness or not favorable. That's the only duality worth considering. Is this good for serving Krishna? Text 12. At this time, being desirous of obtaining a son, a leader of dacoits who came from a Sudra family wanted to worship the goddess Bhadrakali by offering her in sacrifice a dull man who was considered no better than an animal. Commentary. Low-class men such as Sudras worship demigods like goddess Kali or Bhadrakali for the fulfillment of material desires. To this end, they sometimes kill a human being before the deity. They generally choose a person who is not very intelligent, in other words, an animal in the shape of a man. Shouldn't be surprised at these things. Material world. Text 13. The leader of the dacoits captured a man-animal for sacrifice, but he escaped. The leader ordered his followers to find him. They ran in different directions, but could not find him. Wandering here and there in the middle of the night, covered by dense darkness, they came to a paddy field, where they saw the exalted son of the Angira family, Jad Bharat, who was sitting in an elevated place, guarding the field against the attacks of deer and wild pigs. Text 14. The followers and servants of the dacoit chief considered Jad Bharat to possess qualities quite suitable for a man-animal. They decided he was a perfect choice for sacrifice. Their faces bright with happiness, they bound him with ropes and brought him to the temple of the goddess Kali. Prabhupada's commentary. In some parts of India, animalistic men are still sacrificed before the goddess Kali. However, such a sacrifice is only performed by Sudras and dacoits. Their business is to plunder the wealthy, and to become successful, they offer an animalistic man before the goddess Kali. It should be noted that they never sacrifice an intelligent man before the goddess. In the body of a Brahmin, Bharat Maharaj appeared deaf and dumb, yet he was the most intelligent man in the world. Nonetheless, being completely surrendered, unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he remained in that condition, did not protest being brought before the deity for slaughter. As we have learned from the previous verse, he was very strong and could have very easily avoided being bound with ropes, but he did not do anything. He simply depended on the Supreme Personality of Godhead for his protection. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur describes surrender unto the Supreme Lord in this way. Marabi Rakabi Yo Ichatohar Nityadas Prati Tuya Adhikar. My Lord, I'm now surrendered unto you. I'm your eternal servant. If you like, you can kill me, or if you like, you can protect me. In any case, I'm fully surrendered unto you. So, we can understand from this that because he was fully surrendered to the Lord, this was not artificial renunciation. That the Lord, he was in that position because the Lord was directing him to be in that position. Because he had no material desires at all, so the Lord did not put him in a situation where he could be distracted by material activities, not even as a Brahmin, Brahminical activities even. So Arjuna also was completely surrendered to Krishna. But Krishna gave him different instructions. He instructed him to take part in the battle of Kurukshetra. So the Lord gives different instructions, but here you understand this is not artificial renunciation on Maharaj Bharat's part. He's not an impersonalist renouncer. His renunciation is coming naturally because he's already fully engaged in devotional service. He has no energy or interest in engaging in anything else because he's fully engaged internally in devotional service to the Lord. There's another example about using the intelligence, like how that works. It's a nice little example about another little Bengali wives' tale here, old Bengali story, Bengali mother folklore. It probably came from one of the scriptures somewhere, but I can't reference it, but I've heard it used, and it's nice. It illustrates some points about there were three boys, and the first boy, he was alone in the jungle, and a tiger came, and his consciousness was everything is spiritual, and so he didn't do anything, and the tiger came and ate him. The second boy also, at another time, he's alone in the jungle, and the tiger is there. And his consciousness is, the Lord is within everyone's heart, super soul. He's in all living beings. He's in the heart of the tiger. Tiger came and he didn't do anything. The tiger came and ate him. Now the third boy, he's in a similar situation. He finds himself alone in the jungle and a tiger comes. But he's a devotee of Krishna. And he prays to Krishna, "Oh my Lord, I'm completely surrendered to you. What do I do in this situation? Please give me some intelligence, give me good guidance." And the Lord says, "Yeah, there's a tiger coming, climb a tree. Climb that tree." So the essence of it is full surrender to the Lord. And it may be different at different times. He may say, climb a tree, or he may say, or may not give that instruction. And whatever it is, just depend on the Lord. Like Prahlad Maharaj, he was actually helpless. he really couldn't do anything. He's only 5 years old. And his father was harassing him in so many ways. And he simply took shelter of the holy name of the Lord. And the Lord himself came and protected him. So we see that Krishna is there, and he does do that for his devotees if they're fully absorbed in him. He says, my devotees never vanquished. Well, not this material body. I mean, after all, Jad Bharat now has full memory of, first he was the emperor, and then he was a deer, and now he's in the body of a Brahmin's son. Hare Krishna, time to go home. Text 15. After this, all the thieves, according to their imaginative ritual for killing animalistic men, bathed Jad Bharat, dressed him in new clothes, decorated him with ornaments befitting an animal, smeared his body with scented oils, and decorated him with tilak, sandalwood pulp, and garlands. He fed him sumptuously, and then brought him before the goddess Kali, offering her incense, lamps, garlands, parched grain, newly grown twigs, sprouts, fruits, and flowers. In this way they worshipped the deity before killing the man-animal, and they vibrated songs and prayers and played drums and bugles. Jad Bharat was then made to sit down before the deity. Wow. They bathed him, dressed him in new clothes, decorated him with ornaments befitting an animal, smeared his body with scented oils, decorated him with tilak, sandalwood pulp, and garlands, fed him sumptuously. Because they wanted to kill him. They wanted to kill him as an offering to get what they wanted. Sounds like the impersonalists in a sort of a way, because there's a class of impersonalists who worship the deity. They worship the deity. They offer so many nice things because they want impersonal realization. And when they get what they want, then they discard the deity. So it's like they're bathing, and Jad Bharat's a pure devotee. They're bathing him, dressing him, feeding him sumptuously, decorating him, tilak, sandalwood pulp, so they can get what they want, and they're going to discard him, killing him. Prabhupada's commentary. It's like killing Krishna, the impersonalist killing Krishna. They deny that he's a person. It's like trying to kill Krishna. Worshipping him that way is like setting him up to kill him. Really. Prabhupada's commentary. In this verse, the word svavidhina, according to their own ritualistic principles, is very significant. According to Vedic Shastras, everything must be done according to regulative principles. But here it is stated that the thieves and rogues devised their own process for killing an animalistic man. The Tamasic Shastras give instructions for the sacrifice of an animal, like a goat or buffalo, before the goddess Kali. There's no mention of killing a man, however dull he may be. This process was manufactured by the dacoits themselves, therefore the word svavidhina is used. Even at this time, there are many sacrifices being conducted without reference to Vedic scriptures. For instance, in Calcutta, recently a slaughterhouse was being advertised as a temple of the goddess Kali. Meat eaters foolishly purchased meat from such shops, thinking it different from ordinary meat and taking it to be prasad of goddess Kali. The sacrifice of a goat or a similar animal before the goddess Kali is mentioned in Shastras just to keep people from eating slaughterhouse meat and becoming responsible for the killing of animals. The conditioned soul has a natural tendency toward sex and meat-eating. Consequently, the Shastras grant them some concessions. Actually, the Shastras aim at putting an end to these abominable activities, but they impart some regulative principles so that gradually meat-eaters and sex hunters will be rectified. So it's a natural tendency of the conditioned soul, is meat-eating and sex. It's a natural tendency. And then the regulative principles are there. They offer some concession, they regulate it with the view to eliminating it gradually. Text 16. At this time, one of the thieves, acting as the chief priest, was ready to offer the blood of Jad Bharat, whom they imagined to be an animal man, to the goddess Kali to drink as liquor. He therefore took up a very fearsome sword, which was very sharp, and consecrating it by the mantra of Bhadrakali, raised it to kill Jad Bharat. So this is entirely concocted. They made this up. So, by not following the scriptures and making something up, you know there's a huge reaction. But throw on top of it all that who Jad Bharat is, he's a pure devotee of the Lord. Put that in the mix. There's no way they're going to get away with this. 17. All the rogues and thieves who had made arrangements for the worship of goddess Kali were low-minded and bound to the modes of nature and ignorance. They were overpowered by the desire to become very rich. Therefore, they had the audacity to disobey the injunctions of the Vedas. So much so, they were prepared to kill Jad Bharat, a self-realized soul born in a Brahmin family. Due to their envy, these dacoits brought him before the goddess Kali for sacrifice. Such people are always addicted to envious activities, and therefore they dared to try to kill Jad Bharat. Jad Bharat was the best friend of all living entities. He was no one's enemy, and he was always absorbed in meditation on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He was born of a good Brahmin father. Killing him was forbidden, even though he might have been an enemy of aggressive persons. In any case, there was no reason to kill Jad Bharat, and the goddess Kali could not bear this. She could immediately understand that these sinful dacoits were about to kill a great devotee of the Lord. Suddenly, the deity's body burst asunder, and the goddess Kali personally emerged from it in a body burning with an intense and intolerable effulgence. This is wife of Lord Shiva, a manifestation of the wife of Lord Shiva. Prabhupada's commentary. According to Vedic injunctions, only an aggressor can be killed. If a person comes with an intent to kill, one can immediately take action and kill in self-defense. It's also stated that one can be killed if he comes to set fire to the house, or to pollute or kidnap one's wife. Lord Ramachandra killed the entire family of Ravan because Ravan kidnapped his wife, Sita Devi. However, killing is not sanctioned in the Shastras for other purposes. The killing of animals and sacrifice to the demigods, who are expansions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is sanctioned for those who eat meat. This is a kind of restriction for meat eating. In other words, the slaughter of animals is also restricted by certain rules and regulations in the Vedas. Considering these points, there was no reason to kill Jad Bharat, who was born in a respectable, highly exalted Brahmin family. He was a God-realized soul and a well-wisher to all living entities. The Vedas did not at all sanction the killing of Jad Bharat by rogues and thieves. Consequently, the goddess Bhadrakali emerged from the deity to give protection to the Lord's devotee. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains that due to the Brahman effulgence of such a devotee as Jad Bharat, the deity was fractured. Only thieves and rogues in the modes of passion and ignorance, and maddened by material opulence, offer a man in sacrifice before Goddess Kali. This is not sanctioned by the Vedic instructions. Presently, there are many hundreds and thousands of slaughterhouses throughout the world that are maintained by a puffed-up population mad for material opulence. Such activities are never supported by the Bhagavat school. It's interesting. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains that due to the Brahman effulgence of such a devotee as Jad Bharat, the deity was fractured. Due to the Brahman effulgence of Jad Bharat, the deity was fractured. Interesting. And Srila Prabhupada puts, Bhaktivedanta Prabhupada puts a little comment here about the deplorable condition of the slaughterhouses that are so prominent all around the world. They're simply an indication of people who are maddened for material opulence, completely maddened. And so they have all these slaughterhouses. It's modes of passion and ignorance. So, stop there. Hare Krishna.